Good morning. Are you lost in your 20's? Well, if you are, it's okay, because so am I. You know, being 20 is weird because, on the one hand, people don't expect shit from you because you're barely an adult, right? But on the other hand, they expect a lot from you? It's hard because when you're 20, uh, people tell you, you know, you can be a whore and fuck around, but at the same time you gotta find someone to settle down with because you don't want to be single in your 30's. Or they'll tell you it's okay to be broke, as long as you just live your life and have fun. But in the same vein, they'll tell you, oh, but you gotta save up because in your 30's you cannot afford to be broke. And there's all kinds of contradictions there, and I find it hard to navigate sometimes. So yeah, I'm like any other 20-year-old. I'm kind of lost, but that's okay because what I also hear from a lot of people is that your 20's is exactly for you to find out what it is you want to do to figure all this stuff out, right? Being lost in your 20's is hardly a new thing. Lots of, well, all the adults over 30 that went through the same thing. However, however, in my line of work, I, tend to work with people a lot, and I socialize often. And sometimes you'll see 30 or 40-year-olds who are still kind of lost, still kind of stunted on their development, which is also fine, by the way. But I just want to take a moment to share with you the stuff that I did to, you know, find some stuff out about myself. Because while I'm still young, 23, I do feel like I have some parts of my life somewhat figured out, and others I still need to work on. So, yeah, for me, what I did to find out a lot of stuff is I just started working, right? Because I graduated high school back in 2019. Then I took a gap year, and then I tried academics in a different country, might I add. But it didn't work out due to, I don't know if you can hear the helicopter. Just gonna wait for it to fly by. Anyway, uh, I graduated back in 2019 from high school. I took a gap year and went to study at college in a different country. But it didn't work out because this was during the pandemic, and I got really depressed, as I'm sure many, many other people did. And after 4, 5, 6 months of college, I had to drop out because the online lectures weren't doing it for me. I moved to a different country expecting to start a new life, but I was just stuck in my dorm all day long, not getting to know new people, just behind the computer, following lectures. It was real sad. But I'm still happy things turned out the way they did because it kind of forced me to get my life in order a little bit. Because as you can probably imagine, grew some real fucking resentment towards academic institutions after that because they made all kinds of promises to make life as normal as possible for students, but I didn't see them, doing it, making our lives as normal as possible. So I grew some resentment, and I was like, okay, fuck this. I'm just gonna make something of myself without a degree. And so I just started working jobs from here to there. Did lots of different things, but in the end, I kind of always knew the jobs that I started, while I did enjoy them, I didn't want to make it my life's work, my career, let's say. And so I was forced to think to myself, what do I really want to do for the rest of my life? Or the rest of your life is a little bit crazy, but at least for the next 5 to 10 years, right? And so something that I heard from what was actually the first episode I ever listened to, the Therapy Gecko podcast. It was the one with Zach Fox, but they talked about chasing a feeling rather than a job, right? So an example of this is if you ask someone, you know, why they want to be a doctor, for example, it's because they want to help people, and that helping people is the feeling that they're chasing. Because yeah, you can help people by being a doctor, but there's a million other ways to help people, right? And so with my college thing, I knew that the feeling I was chasing was making an impact on people's lives. But then COVID got in the way, and I worked odd jobs where I didn't make any impact on people, and while I did enjoy them, it wasn't a sustainable, long time career thing for me. But, and I don't know. I kind of don't want to tell you guys what I actually do for a living, because I'm trying to be more mindful about the stuff that I do share on social media. But what you must know is I work with clients all day. And so one time I was doing my thing, you know, helping my client, and we were just talking. And I noticed that she was being really, really hard on herself. She was going through some difficult stuff in her life. And so I was just telling her, like, take it easy, look at all the stuff you achieved, look at where you're at compared to a couple of years ago, and be proud of it. And, I just went on with our session, and in the end, she got up and she asked me, can I give you a hug? Because, I really needed this kind of conversation. And that's when I realized that I was in the right profession, because while I was, you know, in my head with my college stuff, I would make impact on a lot of people. If you must know, I tried to study creative writing, and in my head, I was going to be some big author that, writes a bestseller, real writer's dream, right? Like, I would write a masterpiece and change people's lives, and when I do a book tour or whatever, I would sign people's books, and they'd say how much impact it had on their lives, and how they were able to achieve their dreams, or at least have a different perspective after they read my book. Well, that was the fantasy. But in that moment with my client, when she gave me that hug, I realized I'm still doing the thing that I set out to do, which was making an impact on people's lives. But it was on a different scale. And it's funny because life usually works this way, right? You ask for something, most of the time, the stuff you seek out, you will get. But it might present itself slightly different than what you expected. And this is what happened to me. And, after that moment, I realized I was in the right profession. So, what am I getting at with this? being lost in your 20s, it's okay. But I do feel like we owe it to ourselves to do a little bit of self exploration, you know, because while I do have my thoughts and opinions about college, some of them positive, some of them negative, what I really noticed, because I was always the odd one out, right? When I dropped out, and after COVID restrictions got a little bit easier, right? We could go out again to clubs and this and that. Every time I would talk to someone my age, they were studying, they were in college or university. And I noticed that a lot of the time people were just doing it for the sake of doing it because they didn't know what they want to do. And I found this really strange because, you know, some people would would be working on a degree that they fucking hated, they were miserable, but then they had the sunk cost fallacy where they're like, oh yeah, but I've been doing it for 2 3 years, I gotta go through to the end. And while I do understand it, I do find it a bit of a waste, right? And my problem with college is that, if you get into that kind of mindset where you gotta finish this degree even though you don't like it, it's a waste of energy in my opinion, because and it's a recipe for a midlife crisis. Because let's say, right after high school you go to college, you don't take a gap year, and you just pick whatever, right? Maybe it's some societal pressure, maybe it's your parents that really want you to become a lawyer or whatever. But deep down, that's not where your passions lie. It's not the feeling you're chasing. You're going after a job, you're going after a function. Let's say you enroll into university or college after high school, and you do this out of obligation by outside sources. Then after the 3 4 5 6 7, I don't know how long you have to study, but after X amount of years of studying, um, you know, you get out of college and suddenly there's nobody to tell you where to go, what deadlines you have, what to do, who to socialize with. And so you decide to do a master's degree, right? And you do the master's degree to prolong the inevitable. But then you get the master's degree and you're in the same spot again. You're forced to ask yourself, what do I want? What's important to me? How am I gonna arrange my life, right? And so this is what I say when we owe it to ourselves to do that self exploration. Because while, yes, you can do that self exploration while in college or university, I really, really do feel like everyone should take at least one gap year, maybe two, maybe three. Hell, for me, it took 3 years to find out, 3 years in total, to find out what I actually wanted to do. So, when you take a gap year, you are kind of forced to find out the stuff that you want to do, because in the 3 gap years I had, they weren't all super productive. I wasn't working all the fucking time. I had moments where I would just sit in bed and rot all day, scrolling social media, watching YouTube, playing video games, eating shitty food, right? But I would also have moments where I was really focused, really locked in, right? Where I would get up early, make myself some nice breakfast, go for a workout, do some meditation, do some journaling, work on creative projects, work on, my music, this and that. And so it's that balance, right, between locking in and feeling shitty that will allow you to explore and find out stuff about yourself. And ask yourself the question, what's the feeling that I'm chasing? Because if you find the answer to that question, the rest will come a lot more easily. And you know, I said that I was lost in my 20s as well. And the way I've been talking so far, it doesn't make it seem like that's the case, probably. But hell, I worked on this career stuff, right? The thing I really focused on more was finding out what I want to do to earn my living, right? And while I'm happy I did this, and at a pretty young age, 23, I found out what I want to do for the rest of my life. It's a privilege for sure. I feel very blessed to have gone through this experience and found this out. But at the same time, I would have liked to travel around more, you know? I would have liked to get into a friend group. I think this is a great thing about college or university is the social connections you can make with people, right? It's not something that I had. I just started working, and what they don't tell you about the unacademic life, not going into college, is that it's a very, very lonely experience. You go out the door, you go to your job, and you're working with 30, 40 year olds, and you don't ever get to know people your age, and most of the free time you have you spend alone, right? All the stuff I did while locked in, I was doing alone. I was doing my workouts alone. I was meditating alone. I was making music alone, and it's really isolating. Where was I going with this? Yeah. And so some respects of my life, the career stuff, the future plans, this is the stuff that I focused on and that I got good at, I suppose. But then there's other aspects of my life, traveling, relationships, even friendships, dude, that I kind of neglected for the other career stuff. And now feeling I'm feeling like I feel like I'm a bit behind compared to some of my friends, who've been to different countries, met a lot of people. They have their friend group that they can always rely on, hang out with. Even if they do go to a different country, they know people there because they traveled. And some of my friends are most of my friends right now. It's actually kind of sad for me at least, but in my last video I talked about going out, right? Like I went out with my friends. Three couples, dude. No, was it three? Yeah, three couples. Three couples, and me and one other guy were the only single ones, right? And that kind of feels bad. It kind of feels sour because, I spent all this time working on career stuff and I neglected relationship stuff. And I'm embarrassed to say, but my longest relationship so far has been my first one that I had in high school. Almost 2 years of a relationship, and ever since I'm, an adult, I couldn't hold a relationship for a year. All the others girls I dated, it was for less than a year, and it's kind of embarrassing. It really is. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of people say you can't have it all in life. You gotta choose one or the other. There's always going to be some parts that are neglected. And while I feel like I've done good on the career department, I'm going to try and look at other aspects of my life, which is, the traveling and the relationship stuff, and just generally being a young, irresponsible 20-year-old. But I'm going to try to fulfill those aspects of my life a little bit more. I got a concert tonight, for example. This is the kind of stuff that I want to be doing more. And so my advice to you is look at the parts of your life uh, where you're lacking, right? Whether it be relationships or career stuff, and really ask yourself the scary questions, right? I think most people in their 20s who are in college, they don't while they're doing good on the social front, and maybe they're traveling and going to concerts, festivals, doing drugs, partying, whatnot, while that aspect of their life might be going really well, maybe they could, you know, focus on the career stuff. Or the other way around. I focused on the career stuff, and now I want to focus on the relationship stuff. Either way, being here lost in your 20s is totally normal, and it's okay. I'm just here to, tell you about my experience and give you advice as a fellow, 20-year-old, to not neglect certain parts of it, because I did. And while I do believe I can still have a nice social life, and I do have an okay social life, but not to the extent that I see other people having. I neglected this, and while I do think I can somewhat recover from it, I sometimes fear that the damage has been done. My brain has been wired in such a way where I don't mind being alone, which is sad because I also really like company from other people. And I guess what I'm trying to say is don't wait for it to be too late. I don't know. Everyone lives and learns at their own pace. But I feel like if you put off certain stuff till a certain age, your brain's gonna be wired in such a way where you can't really go back, right? If I were to, for example, only be focusing on my career stuff throughout all of my 20s till I'm like 30, 35 years old, then, you know, I wouldn't. Yes, I could have my social circles and make connections at 30 or 35, but it wouldn't be the same now, would it? I would probably, have friends, but still keep them at an arm's length or whatever. I would be so consumed into my career where, it's the only thing that I really care about. And my friends would always be nagging about me never wanting to go out. And I'd be like, yeah, sorry guys, but, I got this shop to run or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's something that I want to change right now to not have to overcompensate later. And the same goes for the other way around, right? Like this is what I said. It's a recipe for a midlife crisis. If you're too focused on all the socializing aspects and this and that, and you just go to college for the hell of it, because you don't know what you want to do, you don't know where you want to be in 10 years, for example, then yeah, once you graduate, maybe you'll get an office job, right, in the industry that you studied for in college. You'll do that shit on autopilot, and well, once you're 30, 40 years old, you're gonna realize you don't know yourself. You don't know what you want to do actually, and maybe you go out and you buy an expensive BMW and you fall in love with a cam girl on Chatterbait in Russia, and you can sell the house and divorce your wife and leave the kids to go live with Svetlana or whatever, only to find out it was a dude. Little silly little example, right? But you get the point. You know, if you neglect certain parts of your life, it's gonna be consequences. There's gonna be consequences later down the line. And the 20s, they're for exploration, they're for development, and finding out who it is you are and what it is you want and how you're gonna get it. And I guess that's what I'm doing right this moment. I'm reflecting on my life, and I ask you to do the same. You know, use your 20s to fuck around, right? Like, have fun, but also be aware of the stuff that you're neglecting in your life and try to be mindful of it. Take a gap year if you have to. I recommend everyone take a gap year because you'll find out a lot of stuff about yourself. And yeah, just fuck around and find out. That's all I have.